The Valoran spaceship came out of hyperspace above a burning moon called Drath 7. This moon was famous across the galaxy. It was covered in volcanoes and rivers of hot lava. But the Valorans did not come for the volcanoes. They came for something far more valuable. Commander Thylo stood on the bridge of his ship. His gray skin looked almost blue under the lights of his control panels. He was tall and thin, like all Valorans, with 4 eyes that never blinked. Today was an important day. Today, his team would capture 3 dragon cubs. The dragons of Drath 7 were the most mysterious creatures in the known galaxy. They could create fire inside their bodies. Not small fire, but fire hot enough to melt metal. Scientists had studied them for hundreds of years, but still did not understand how they did it. The Valoran High Council wanted answers. They wanted living specimens. The capture team landed near the southern volcanoes. They wore special suits that could handle extreme heat. They carried weapons that could knock out creatures 10 times their size. They were ready for anything. What they found was a nest. 3 dragon cubs were sleeping together in a crater. Their mother was gone, probably hunting somewhere in the lava fields. The cubs were young, maybe only a few months old by Earth time. They were each about the size of a small car. Their scales were black like night, but with lines of orange and red running through them like cracks in cooling lava. The capture was quick and ugly. The team fired stun nets first. The nets wrapped around the cubs and sent electricity through their bodies. The cubs screamed. It was a terrible sound that the team members would remember for years. Then came the sedation darts. One by one, the cubs stopped moving. By the time the mother dragon returned, her babies were gone. She searched for 3 days. She burned everything in her path. But spaceships are fast, and her cubs were already light years away. At Valoran Research Station 12, Dr. Havoc waited for his new specimens. He was the head scientist at the station, and he had been studying alien life forms for 40 years. He had seen thousands of creatures from hundreds of worlds. But he had never seen anything like Drathian dragons. The cubs arrived in special containers made of the strongest metal in the galaxy. Even through the thick walls, Dr. Havoc could feel the heat coming from inside. When the containers opened and the cubs were moved to their holding cells, everyone stood back. The cubs were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Their scales seemed to move and shift between black and orange. Their eyes glowed like small suns. When they opened their mouths, everyone could see teeth that looked like they were made of crystal. The largest cub stood in front of the other 2. It was protecting them. The middle cub kept looking around, trying to understand this strange new place. The smallest cub was shaking. It pressed itself against its siblings and would not look at anything. "Magnificent," Dr. Havoc said. "Begin the tests immediately." The problem started on the first day. The cubs would not eat. The research team tried everything. They offered meat from a dozen different animals. They made special nutrient drinks. They even tried to recreate the minerals found in Drath 7's lava. Nothing worked. The cubs would not drink either. They just sat in the corner of their cell, pressed together, and watched the researchers with hate in their glowing eyes. Worse than this, they were dangerous. Anytime someone tried to enter the cell, the cubs attacked. They breathed fire that melted the researchers' protective gear. They slashed with claws that cut through metal like paper. 3 researchers were badly burned in the first week. "Perhaps we should just take what tissue samples we need," one scientist suggested. "The live specimens are becoming too difficult." Dr. Havoc considered this. He did not like to waste specimens, but the scientist had a point. Dead dragons could still teach them much about fire generation. Then something changed. Yuna arrived at Station 12 on a Tuesday. She was part of an exchange program between Earth and the Valoran Empire. She was 19 years old, a student of xenobiology at a university in Korea. She had been sent to the station to help with small tasks like organizing files and cleaning equipment. The Vallarans did not pay much attention to her. Humans were still new to the galactic community. Most aliens thought they were primitive and not very smart. Yuna was given a small room in the lower levels of the station and a list of boring jobs to do. She did not mind. She was happy just to be in space, surrounded by creatures and technology she had only read about in books. At night, she walked through the station's corridors, looking at everything with wonder. On her fourth night, she heard crying. It was not a human cry. It was deeper, stranger, filled with a sadness that seemed to reach inside her chest and squeeze her heart. She followed the sound through maintenance tunnels and forgotten hallways. Her student card opened doors that probably should have been locked to her. Nobody had bothered to restrict her access properly. Finally, she found the source. The dragon cubs were in a large holding cell. The room was dark except for emergency lights on the walls. But there was another light too, coming from 6 pairs of glowing eyes. The largest cub was pressed against the barrier that kept them inside. It was making the crying sound. Behind it, its siblings huddled together, shaking with fear. Yuna stood very still. She knew what these creatures were. Everyone on the station talked about them. She knew they were dangerous. She knew she should leave and report what she had found. Instead, she sat down on the cold floor. She crossed her legs and took a deep breath. Then she began to sing. It was an old Korean lullaby. Her grandmother had sung it to her when she was small, during storms when the thunder frightened her. The words were about mountains that stood strong against wind and rain, about rivers that kept flowing no matter what stood in their way, about patience and hope and waiting for better days. Her voice was soft. She was not a great singer, but in the quiet of that dark room, her song filled every corner. The crying stopped. The largest cub turned its massive head toward her. Its glowing eyes studied her. Behind it, the other cubs also looked. Nobody moved. Yuna kept singing until the song was done. Then she sat in silence for a while. The cubs watched her. She watched them. "I am sorry," she said finally. "I am sorry they took you from your home." The smallest cub made a sound. It was not a cry this time. It was something softer, like a question. "I know you do not understand me," Yuna continued. "But I want you to know that not everyone here wants to hurt you. Some of us just want to help." She stayed for an hour that first night. She sang more songs. She talked about her home on Earth, about mountains and oceans, about her family and her dreams. The cubs listened. They did not attack. They did not even move toward her aggressively. When she finally left, the smallest cub made that soft sound again. Yuna returned the next night, and the night after that. She told no one what she was doing. It was her secret, shared only with 3 frightened children from a burning world. She did not know that everything was about to change. She did not know that she would become the most important person in these creatures' lives. She only knew that they were scared and alone, just like she sometimes felt in this strange place so far from home. And she knew that no child, no matter what species, should ever have to cry alone in the dark. For 1 week, Yuna visited the dragon cubs every night. She would wait until the station was quiet, when most workers were sleeping. Then she would walk through the empty corridors to the holding cell. She always brought her small music player and a book from Earth. The cubs began to expect her. On the 5th night, when she arrived, all 3 of them were already waiting near the barrier. Their eyes glowed softly in the darkness. The smallest cub made its questioning sound the moment it saw her. "Hello," Yuna said, sitting in her usual spot. "I brought a new story tonight. It is about a princess who lived under the sea. She did not know if they understood her words, but they seemed to understand something. When she read to them, their bodies relaxed. Their breathing became slow and peaceful. The largest cub would close its eyes halfway, looking almost sleepy. On the seventh night, something important happened. The smallest cub walked right up to the barrier where Yuna sat. It pressed its snout against the transparent wall. Its scales clinked softly against the surface. Then it made a new sound, something between a purr and a rumble, deep in its throat. Yuna pressed her hand against the barrier. Her palm was small against the cub's massive face. "It is okay," she whispered. "I am here." The cub closed its eyes. What Yuna did not know was that she was being watched. Security Chief Varus reviewed all footage from the restricted areas every morning. It was his job to make sure nothing strange happened on the station. On the eighth day, he found something very strange indeed. A human girl singing to their most dangerous specimens. He took the footage to Dr. Havoc immediately. Dr. Havoc watched the recordings with his 4 eyes blinking rapidly. This was a sign of extreme confusion for his species. He watched Yuna sit outside the cell. He watched her read stories. He watched the cubs react to her presence with something that looked almost like happiness. "This is not possible," he said. "These creatures are Category 7 predators. They do not respond to social bonding." "And yet," Varus said, pointing at the screen. On the recording, the smallest cub was pressing against the barrier, making that rumbling sound. Its siblings watched peacefully. There was no aggression, no fear. Just 3 young creatures enjoying the company of a small human girl. Dr. Havoc made a decision. "Bring her to me." Yuna stood in the Research Council's meeting room the next morning. She was surrounded by Valoran scientists, all of them much taller than her, all of them staring at her with their unblinking eyes. Her heart was beating very fast, but she kept her face calm. "You have been entering restricted areas without permission," Dr. Havoc said. His voice was cold. "You have been interfering with valuable research specimens. Explain yourself." Yuna took a breath. "I heard them crying," she said. "On my 4th night here. I followed the sound and found them." "And you thought it was appropriate to sing to Category 7 predators?" "I thought it was appropriate to comfort frightened children." The room went very quiet. "They are not children," Dr. Havoc said slowly. "They are specimens. Scientific subjects for important research." "They are babies," Yuna replied. Her voice was soft but steady. "They were taken from their mother. They are scared and confused. They do not understand why they are here or what you want from them." She looked directly at Dr. Havoc. "They are not attacking because they are dangerous. They are attacking because they are terrified." One of the other scientists made a dismissive sound. "This is human sentimentality. She is projecting emotions onto creatures that cannot possibly feel them. Then why have they started eating?" Yuna asked. The room went quiet again. "Your reports say they have not eaten since they arrived," Yuna continued. "But that is not true anymore, is it? I know you have cameras. You must have seen that they eat now. They eat when I am there, because they feel safe enough to eat." Dr. Havoc checked his datapad. The human was correct. In the past 3 days, all 3 specimens had begun accepting food. They ate only when the human girl was present, but they ate. "The largest one always checks the food first," Yuna said. "It makes sure it is safe before it lets the others eat. The middle one is curious about everything. It watches me closely, like it is trying to learn something. The smallest one was the most scared at first, but now it comes closest to me." She paused. "These are not just behaviors. These are personalities. These are individuals." "You have been observing them very carefully," Dr. Havoc said. There was something different in his voice now. Less anger, more interest. Someone should, Yuna said simply. The research council talked for 3 hours after Yuna left the room. Some of them wanted to remove her access and continue the research as planned. Others were curious about her observations. A few were secretly impressed by her courage in speaking to them so directly. In the end, Dr. Havoc made a practical decision. The specimens were eating again. The specimens were calm. Whatever the human girl was doing, it was working better than anything his team had tried. "We will give her official access," he announced. "She will work with the specimens under supervision. We will document everything. Is that wise?" One scientist asked. "She has no training." "She has something better," Dr. Havoc said, looking at the footage of Yuna pressing her hand against the barrier. "She has their trust." Yuna received her new assignment that evening. She was no longer just an exchange student doing small tasks. She was now the primary behavioral specialist for the Drathian specimens. It was a fancy title for a simple job. Keep the dragons happy. She was given proper access cards and a schedule that allowed her to visit the cubs at any time. She was given a small office near the holding area where she could write her observations. Most importantly, she was given permission to do something no one else had done. She was allowed to enter the holding cell. The first time she walked through the barrier, her whole body was shaking. The cubs were much bigger up close. The largest one could have swallowed her whole. Its teeth were longer than her fingers. Its claws could have cut through her like she was made of paper. It did not attack her. Instead, it lowered its massive head until its eye was level with her face. It studied her for a long moment. Then it made a sound low and soft, almost like a greeting. "Hello," Yuna whispered. "It is nice to finally meet you properly." The smallest cub rushed forward. Before Yuna could react, it had pressed its head against her stomach, nearly knocking her over. It made that rumbling sound, louder than ever before. Yuna laughed. It was a sound no one had heard in the holding area before. She put her arms around the cub's neck, as far as they would reach, and held on. The middle cub watched from a few feet away. It seemed more cautious than its siblings. But after a few minutes, it too walked closer. It did not touch her, but it sat near her, close enough that she could feel the heat from its body. From the observation room, Dr. Havoc watched with amazement. In 40 years of research, he had never seen anything like this. A human girl hugging a dragon cub like it was a pet cat. And the dragon was letting her. "What is she doing?" his assistant asked. Dr. Havoc shook his head slowly. "I believe," he said, "she is showing them something they have never seen from us. She is showing them kindness." That night, Yuna stayed in the cell for hours. She sat on the floor and the cubs arranged themselves around her. The largest lay behind her like a wall of warmth. The middle sat beside her, occasionally sniffing her hair with curiosity. The smallest curled up with its head in her lap, its eyes closed, making that contented rumbling sound. Yuna sang to them until they slept. She watched their scales shift and glow in the dim light. She felt their breath, warm and steady, against her skin. In that moment, she made a silent promise to them. She would protect them, no matter what happened, no matter what it cost her. She would not let anyone hurt these children again. She did not know how hard that promise would be to keep, but she meant every word of it. 6 months passed on Research Station 12. The dragon cubs grew bigger every week. Their containment area had to be expanded twice to give them room to move. By now, each cub was the size of a small house. But despite their size, they remained gentle with Yuna. The station had rules about research specimens. One of the most important rules was simple: do not name them. Names created attachment. Attachment created problems. Scientists were supposed to stay distant from their subjects. Yuna ignored this rule completely. She called the largest cub Duri. In Korean, it meant something like a strong pillar, something that holds things up and keeps them safe. It was a perfect name for this cub. From the first day of capture, Duri had protected its siblings. It always stood between them and danger. It checked their food before they ate. It stayed awake while they slept. Duri's scales were the darkest of the three, with lines of deep red running through them like rivers of fire. The middle cub became Hanyul, which meant sky. This cub was the most curious of the three. It was always watching, always learning. When Yuna showed it something new, its head would tilt to one side in a way that looked almost human. Hanyul's fire was different from its siblings. While most Drathian fire burned orange and yellow, Hanyul's flames were almost blue. The scientists found this very interesting. Yuna just thought it was beautiful. Beautiful. The smallest cub she named Bile. Star. This cub had been the most damaged by the capture. For weeks, it had refused to eat, refused to move, refused to do anything except cry. Now, it was the happiest of the three. Bile was always the first to greet Yuna when she entered the holding area. It made the loudest rumbling sounds. It followed her everywhere, as much as its size allowed. Dr. Havoc noticed the names in Yuna's reports. "You cannot name research specimens," he told her one morning. "It goes against all scientific rules." "The names are from my own records," Yuna replied calmly. "You can keep calling them Specimen A, B, and C if you want." Dr. Havoc wanted to argue, but he did not. The truth was, everything had improved since Yuna started working with the cubs. They ate regularly now. They allowed researchers to take samples without attacking. They were healthier and stronger than anyone had expected. Whatever Yuna was doing, it was working. The research team made discoveries during these months. They learned that the dragon's fire came from two sources. Part of it was biological, created by special organs inside their bodies. But part of it was something else, something the scientists called psionic. This meant the dragons could create fire using only their minds. They learned that the dragon's scales contained special metals that protected them from heat. They learned that the cubs could solve complex problems, sometimes faster than adult Valorans. They were not just animals. They were intelligent beings. But the most important discovery came by accident. In the 7th month, Yuna got sick. It was just a simple cold, the kind that humans got all the time. But the station's medical officer was worried about spreading disease between species. She ordered Yuna to stay in the medical bay for 4 days. 4 days without visiting the cubs. On the first day, the cubs stopped eating. Duri paced back and forth in the holding area, making loud sounds that worried the researchers. Hanyul sat in the corner where Yuna usually sat and would not move. Bile cried constantly, that same terrible crying that Yuna had heard on her first night. On the second day, Duri tried to break through the barrier. Its fire burned so hot that 3 barrier sections melted completely. Security teams had to install emergency replacements while the cubs screamed. On the 3rd day, Dr. Havoc went to the medical bay himself. "The specimens are destroying the holding area," he said. "They will not eat. They will not calm down. What have you done to them?" Yuna was weak and pale, but her voice was strong. "I have not done anything to them. I just have not been there. They are research specimens. They should not care whether you are there or not." "They are not specimens," Yuna said. The same thing she had told him months ago. "They are children, and they think I have left them, just like their mother did." Dr. Havoc was quiet for a moment. "What do you suggest?" "Let me see them. Just for a few minutes. I need to let them know I am still here." The medical officer tried to protest, but Dr. Havoc overruled her. Yuna was brought to the holding area in a wheelchair, still wearing her medical clothes, still weak from her illness. The moment she appeared, everything changed. Dory stopped pacing immediately. Its head turned toward her, and it made a sound unlike anything the researchers had recorded before. It was not a cry or a roar. It was something softer, something almost like relief. Haniel stood up from its corner and walked toward the barrier. Its blue flames flickered gently, creating dancing patterns of light. Bile practically ran toward Yuna. It pressed against the barrier so hard that the emergency replacements groaned under the pressure. It made that rumbling sound, but louder than ever, mixed with small whimpering noises. "I am here," Yuna said, pressing her hand against the barrier. "I am sorry. I was sick, but I am getting better. I did not leave you. I would never leave you." She stayed for only 20 minutes. It was all her body could handle. But in those 20 minutes, the cubs calmed completely. They ate the food that researchers brought them. They stopped trying to break through the walls. When Yuna left, Bile made a sad sound. But it did not cry. It seemed to understand that she would come back. In the observation room, research assistant Morel turned to Dr. Havoc. "They thought she was gone," he said. There was wonder in his voice. They thought she had abandoned them, like their mother. They were mourning. "That is not possible," Dr. Havoc said. But he did not sound certain anymore. "They love her," Morel said simply. "And she loves them." Dr. Havoc did not respond. He just watched the footage of Yuna pressing her hand against the barrier, with 3 massive dragons pressed against the other side, reaching for her in the only way they could. When Yuna returned to full duty a week later, she made some changes. She started sleeping in a small room connected to the holding area, so the cubs could always know she was nearby. She started teaching them things, simple things at first, like responding to their names. Dory learned fastest. When Yuna called Dory, it would turn its head toward her immediately. Then it would make that greeting sound low and warm. Haniel was more playful about it. Sometimes it would pretend not to hear, just to make Yuna call again. Then it would look at her with its curious eyes, and Yuna could almost see it laughing. Bile responded to everything. Call its name, and it would come running. Say anything at all, and it would press against the barrier, wanting to be close. "They understand you," Morel said one day, watching Yuna work with the cubs. "Not just your tone or your movements. They actually understand your words." "Of course they do," Yuna said. "They're smarter than most people give them credit for." She looked at the 3 cubs, each one now the size of a building, each one watching her with glowing eyes full of trust. They understand everything. They always have. They were just waiting for someone to talk to them like they mattered. That night, alone with the cubs, Yuna sat on the floor of the holding area. Dory lay behind her like a mountain of scales. Haniel sat beside her, occasionally nudging her shoulder with its snout. Bile's head rested in her lap, its eyes closed, making that contented rumbling sound. "I love you," Yuna told them. It was not the first time she had said it. "All 3 of you. I know you understand. I just want you to hear it." Bile opened its eyes. It made a sound Yuna had never heard before, something that seemed to contain many notes at once, like a song made of fire. Yuna did not know what the sound meant, but somehow, deep in her heart, she understood it perfectly. They loved her too. They had loved her from the moment she first sat outside their cell and sang them a lullaby. And they would love her for as long as they lived. She just had to make sure they lived long enough for that to matter. The message from the Valoran High Science Council arrived on a cold morning in the station's 18th month. Dr. Havoc read it 3 times, hoping he had misunderstood. But the words were clear. The dragon specimens were to be vivisected. Vivisection meant cutting open a living creature to study its insides. The council wanted to see how the fire organs worked while they were still active. They wanted to map the cubs' brains while they were still alive. The procedures would kill all 3 specimens, but the council did not care about that. They only cared about the knowledge they would gain. The vivisection was scheduled for 1 month from now. Dr. Havoc sat alone in his office for a long time. He had been a scientist for 40 years. He had done many things that others might consider cruel, but he had always believed it was for a good reason, for the progress of knowledge, for the benefit of all species. Now he was not so sure. He had watched Una with the cubs. He had seen how they responded to her. He had read her reports, full of observations that no Valoran scientist had ever made. She wrote about their personalities, their fears, their joys. She wrote about them like they were people. And maybe they were. Dr. Havoc made a decision he had never made before in his long career. He went to tell Una the truth. He found her in the holding area, sitting with the cubs. Bile was curled around her like a protective wall of scales. Dury and Haniel were playing a game nearby, chasing each other in circles and breathing small bursts of fire. They looked happy. "I need to speak with you," Dr. Havoc said. Privately. Something in his voice made Una look up quickly. She said goodbye to the cubs and followed him to his office. When the door closed behind them, Dr. Havoc handed her the message from the council. Una read it once. Her face went very pale. She read it again. "No," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry," Dr. Havoc said. And he meant it. "The council's decisions are final. There is nothing I can do. You can refuse. Then they will send someone else to do it. And they will remove me from the station." He paused. "And probably remove you as well." Una stared at the message in her hands. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes, but she did not let them fall. "There has to be something," she said. "Some way to stop this." Dr. Havoc was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke very carefully. "The Terran Embassy has been making inquiries about your work here. Your government has expressed interest in establishing a sanctuary program for endangered species." Una looked up at him. "Diplomatic negotiations could take years," Dr. Havoc continued. "But if, somehow, the specimens were relocated to Terran jurisdiction before the vivisection date," he spread his hands, "then they would no longer be Valoran property. The council could not touch them." "That would be theft," Una said slowly. "Yes, my career would be over. I could go to prison. Almost certainly." Una was quiet. She thought about Dury, who had protected its siblings from the first moment of capture. She thought about Haniel, whose curious eyes watched everything with wonder. She thought about Bile, who had cried in the dark until a human girl came and sang to it. She thought about her promise. "Tell me what I need to do," she said. The plan was impossible. That was what everyone told her, everyone who agreed to help. There were only 17 of them in the end. A few researchers who had grown to care about the cubs. A dock supervisor who owed money to the wrong people and needed Terran currency. A pilot who believed that all intelligent creatures deserve freedom. And Una, who refused to let her children die. She had 11 days to prepare. 11 days to act normal during the day while planning treason at night. 11 days to figure out how to move 3 dragons, now each the size of a small spacecraft, from the most secure research station in Valoran space. The hardest part was the cubs themselves. They were too big to move without help. They would need to walk themselves onto the escape ship. And they would need to stay calm and quiet while surrounded by strangers in a terrifying situation. Una told them the night before. She sat in the holding area with all 3 cubs gathered around her. The lights were dim. Everyone else had gone to sleep. This might be her last night with them if everything went wrong. "We are leaving tomorrow," she said. Her voice was steady, even though her heart was racing. "I am taking you somewhere safe. Somewhere with mountains and sky and room to fly. But I need you to trust me. Dory lowered its massive head until its eye was level with Yuna's face. It made a low sound, questioning. I know you understand me, Yuna continued. I have known for a long time. So I need you to understand this. It might not work. We might get caught. And if we do, I do not know what will happen. Her voice cracked slightly. But I promise you, I will not let them hurt you. Whatever it takes. Haniel pressed closer to her, its blue flames flickering softly. Bile made a sound that Yuna had never heard before. It was something like a whine and a purr mixed together, filled with emotion that words could not express. I love you, Yuna whispered. All of you. No matter what happens tomorrow, I need you to know that. The cubs pressed around her, surrounding her with warmth and the soft glow of their scales. In their own way, they were telling her the same thing. The escape began at dawn. The cubs were given a mild sedative, just enough to make them appear sleepy and docile. They were loaded into specially modified cargo containers, marked as geological samples in the station system. Yuna walked beside them, wearing borrowed researcher credentials and trying to look calm. The cargo bay was busy at this hour. Workers moved crates and containers in every direction. Nobody paid attention to one human girl and her geological samples, until they reached the final checkpoint. Security Chief Varos was standing at the gate. He looked at Yuna's credentials. He looked at the cargo containers. He looked at Yuna again. She could feel her heart pounding. This was it. Everything they had worked for, everyone who had helped her, all of it would be wasted if Varos raised the alarm. Varos was quiet for a long moment. Behind them, workers continued their routines, not noticing anything strange. The cargo containers hummed softly with life support systems. Varos had watched a lot of security footage over the past 18 months. He had seen a human girl sing lullabies to dragons. He had seen those same dragons cry when she was sick and calm when she returned. He had seen something he had never expected to see in a research facility. He had seen love. Varos had a daughter. She was small, like this human girl. She looked at him the same way these dragons looked at Yuna, with trust and adoration and the certainty that he would never let her down. Cargo Shuttle 7 is cleared for departure, Varos said loudly. His voice was steady. Standard shipment. No inspection required. He stepped aside. Yuna stared at him for just a moment. She wanted to thank him. She wanted to hug him. But there was no time, and any unusual behavior could draw attention. She simply nodded and walked forward. The shuttle launched 30 minutes later. It jumped to hyperspace before anyone on the station realized what had happened. By the time Dr. Havik received the security alert, Yuna and the cubs were already light years away. He read the alert twice. Then he smiled, very slightly. Good luck, he said to no one. Take care of them. On the shuttle, hidden in their cargo containers, the cubs were waking up from their sedation. They could feel the strange sensation of hyperspace travel. They could smell the recycled air of an unfamiliar ship. But they could also hear Yuna's voice, soft and steady, singing an old lullaby about mountains and rivers and waiting for better days. They were not afraid. They were going home. 3 years had passed since the escape from Research Station 12. The Drathian sanctuary on Ganymede, one of the moons of Jupiter, had become famous across the galaxy. It was the first place where rescued dragons could live freely, protected by human laws and human kindness. The sanctuary had no walls strong enough to hold its residents. The dragons stayed because they wanted to stay. Duri, Haniel, and Bile had grown to their full adult size. Each one was now larger than an aircraft carrier from old Earth. Their wingspans blocked out the stars when they flew. Their fire could be seen from space. They were magnificent creatures, powerful beyond imagination. But to Yuna, they were still her children. She walked through the sanctuary's main habitat, a massive dome that covered thousands of acres of volcanic terrain. The designers had tried to recreate the conditions of Draft 7. Hot springs bubbled throughout the area. Artificial lava flows provided warmth and minerals. The dome's ceiling displayed an endless view of stars. 17 dragons now lived in the sanctuary. Some had been rescued from other research stations. Some had been saved from collectors who kept them as exotic pets. Some had been found injured and alone on distant worlds. Duri, Haniel, and Bile had become their teachers and protectors. The 3 original cubs had learned something important during their time with Yuna. They had learned that not all species were enemies. They had learned that kindness existed in the universe. Now they passed this knowledge to every new arrival. Yuna found Bile near the central hot spring. Even at its enormous size, Bile still ran to greet her like a puppy whenever she appeared. Its tail, now the size of a subway train, wagged back and forth, creating small earthquakes in the ground. "Good morning," Yuna said, pressing her hand against Bile's snout. The scales were warm under her palm. "Did you sleep well?" Bile made that rumbling sound, the one it had made since it was small. Even after all these years, it was still her signal of happiness. Nearby, Haniel was teaching a young dragon how to control its fire. The youngster kept producing small bursts by accident, looking embarrassed each time. Haniel was patient, showing the technique again and again, its blue flames dancing in careful demonstration. And on a high ridge overlooking the whole habitat, Duri stood watch. It always stood watch. Some things never changed. Duri was still the protector, still the guardian, still the one who made sure everyone was safe. "Director Yuna?" A young assistant hurried toward her, looking excited. "There is a visitor at the entrance. He says he has an appointment." Yuna knew who it was. Dr. Havoc had visited the sanctuary once every year since its creation. He called them research consultations. Everyone knew the real reason. She found him in the observation lounge, looking out at the habitat through the thick glass. He was older now. His gray skin faded to almost white, but his 4 eyes were still sharp. "They have grown," he said when Yuna joined him. "Every time I visit, they are bigger." "Dragons never stop growing," Yuna said. "Not completely. They just slow down eventually." They watched together as Duri launched from its ridge. The great dragon flew in a wide circle around the dome, its dark scales catching the artificial sunlight. 2 smaller dragons followed it, young ones learning the flight patterns. "I was wrong," Dr. Havoc said quietly. "About everything." Yuna looked at him but did not speak. The cognition tests, the behavioral models, the classification systems. He shook his head slowly. "All wrong. We tried to measure them like they were machines. We counted their responses and calculated their reactions. We thought we understood them." He turned to face Yuna. "You never did any of that. You just sat with them and sang songs. And you learned more about them than 40 years of Valoran research." "I did not learn about them," Yuna said. "I got to know them. There is a difference." Dr. Havoc was quiet for a while. Then he asked the question he had wanted to ask for 3 years. "How did you know? That first night, when you walked into the holding chamber, how did you know they would not hurt you?" Yuna thought carefully before answering. She remembered that night clearly. The dark room, the glowing eyes, the crying that had pulled at her heart. "On Earth," she said finally, "we have a saying. You can judge a society by how it treats its most vulnerable members. Its children, its elderly, those who cannot protect themselves." She turned to look at the dragons flying outside the window. "I did not know anything special that night. I did not have any scientific insight. I just heard children crying in the dark, and I knew that no child should ever have to cry alone. She paused. So I treated them the way I would want to be treated if I was scared and far from home. I treated them like they mattered. Dr. Havoc nodded slowly. He understood finally something that he had failed to see for his entire career. Science was important. Knowledge was valuable. But kindness was the thing that made everything else worthwhile. The galaxy, he said softly, does not deserve your species. Una smiled. Maybe not. But we are here anyway. And we are not going anywhere. Dr. Havoc died 2 weeks later. In his will, he left his entire fortune to the Drathian sanctuary. It was enough to expand the habitat, to rescue dozens more dragons, to continue the work that Una had started. 10 years after the escape, Una was offered a position at the Galactic Academy of Sciences. It was the highest honor any researcher could receive. The salary was enormous. The prestige was unmatched. She could have become famous throughout the universe. She turned it down in one sentence. I already have everything I want, she wrote. She stayed on Ganymede. She watched her dragons grow and thrive. She welcomed each new rescue with the same patience and kindness she had shown to 3 frightened cubs on a distant research station. Duri, Hanuel, and Bile never left her side. They were too big now to curl up around her like they had when they were small. But every night, Una would walk to the central ridge, and all 3 of them would gather nearby. She would sit in their shadow, surrounded by warmth, and she would sing the same lullabies her grandmother had taught her. Songs about mountains and rivers. Songs about patience and hope. Songs about waiting for better days that had finally arrived. The dragons would close their eyes and listen. Sometimes the younger dragons joined them, drawn by the music. Sometimes the whole sanctuary fell silent, 17 ancient creatures humming softly along with a single human voice. Other species never quite understood it. They studied the sanctuary from afar. They wrote papers about the unusual bond between humans and Drathians. They developed theories and models and classification systems. But they missed the simple truth. In a galaxy that saw them as specimens, one human had chosen to see them as children. She had given them names. She had sung them songs. She had loved them without expecting anything in return. And in return, they had given her something that no scientific paper could ever measure. They had given her a family. The humans called it love. The dragons called it home. And Una, sitting in the warmth of her children's fire, watching the stars turn overhead, called it exactly what it was. A safe haven. For all of them, forever.